I'm digressing only a little, I hope. No, certainly there was nobody who took the struggle against Islamic fascism seriously could have been content with the performance of the Clinton administration, which didn't take it seriously, was culpably neglectful of it, and in its one counterstroke, alleged counterstroke, committed an atrocity by blowing up a civilian facility in Sudan on presidential order on the pretext that it was a nerve gas facility, but without demanding an inspection. Note well, if it was a nerve gas facility, it could hardly have been folded like a tent and moved into the desert, could it? No inspection was required, no warning was given, no reference to the United Nations was made or to Congress. Every liberal in the country forgives Mr. Clinton for that. I don't. It had the paradoxical effect, I call it paradoxical anyway, of making Mr. bin Laden look good. A pretty difficult task in the context. No, well, as with the whole 8 years of Mr. Clinton in foreign policy, those years were eaten by the locust at best, and these were 8 years we couldn't have afforded. So Mr. Free and Mr. O'Neill didn't get near, I think, criticizing how unbelievably squalid and pointless that period in American political life really was. And how unself-critical its supporters, by the way, still are. They still think they're only a Florida recount away from having been proved right. What can you do with such people? I leave the question with you, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters.
You've written a book calling for criminal charges against Henry Kissinger. Recently, however, the U.S. sought to exempt American officials, not just American soldiers, from the International Court of Criminal Justice. How does this affect the effort to bring Kissinger to justice?
Well, in the following way, that's, I think, of great moment, and I say that quite independent of my own campaign. Though, I'll just tell you, in case you want an update, that since the book came out and since the campaign began, Henry Kissinger was visited by the gendarmerie in Paris in the Ritz Hotel and summoned to a court to answer questions about Pinochet and the disappearance of French people in that terrible immolation, and fled town. But the warrant is still extant for when he comes back. He's been sought for questioning by the magistrates in Chile, where I've been to testify against him, Judge Guzman, the main judge in the Pinochet case, and Judge Rodolfo Corral, the main judge in the death squad case in Argentina, is also seeking his testimony. An attempt was made to have a judge issue a bench warrant for his arrest in London quite recently, and will be repeated if he tries to return there. The Brazilian government asked him to cancel an official visit to Brazil a few weeks ago on the grounds that his immunity from prosecution couldn't be guaranteed. Some of the oxygen from around the guy is being sucked out, I'm glad to say. And he's not free to travel anywhere without consulting lawyers each time, and there are some countries he wouldn't dare go to. And there's some I haven't mentioned where it's self-evident he wouldn't try and take a holiday in any case. So this is not good enough, but it's a start. In other words, something like a consistent human rights ethic of international law touching war crimes and crimes against humanity is beginning to apply to him. He's also being sued in federal court in Washington, D.C. by the relatives of people who were murdered on his orders in Chile. Unfortunately, that suit was filed on the 11th of September 2001 and hasn't had all the coverage I would have liked for it, but we are working on it. Now, very importantly, and to answer your question, the lady's question more directly, or the gentleman's question, in a recent long article by Elizabeth Becker in the New York Times and in some other reportage that's come into print in the legal journals, it's been made very clear by senior members of the administration that their reason for wanting to withdraw the American signature from the International Criminal Court is the protection of Henry Kissinger. That they are aware that this could be a grave embarrassment to the Republican Party and to the Bush administration, and as they think, because they want to implicate all of us in his crimes, the United States. Now, think about that for one thing. Think about the insult that that involves for American society, American culture, for everyone here who pays taxes or votes. But it's much worse than that. Think about what they haven't done for Saddam Hussein. What's the obvious thing the US administration should have done by now? It should have asked for his indictment for war crimes and crimes against humanity, asked its ambassador at the United Nations to lodge this complaint with the UN Human Rights Committee, or perhaps made an application to The Hague for a warrant for his arrest. It's the first thing you would think that a government bent on regime change would do. Why haven't they done it? Because they can't do it. because they've thrown away, to defend Kissinger, they've thrown away a weapon that could have punished Saddam Hussein. Thus, Henry Kissinger helps to protect Saddam Hussein. This is not an irony or a contradiction, it's what you would expect, because those of us who believe in a consistent human rights ethic and a consistent international law ethic would obviously have gotten both by now. If you're not going to get both, you have to be against getting either. So the consequences of this are unbelievably serious. And it seems to me that any one of you who knows who their congressman is, or even their senator, should be making a fantastic stink about it, because the protection of Henry Kissinger is endangering civilization in a very direct sense, even more than his protection was an offense to it before now. We are really playing for real with all this. This is not rhetorical talk anymore. All of these things matter very much, and it's a gigantic responsibility, both of these cases, that's fallen upon American society and isn't being properly discharged.
Is the American public's willingness to give up or restrict their civil liberties a short-term dementia?
It's never clear to me whether people know how much they've given up. For example, if a lawyer now wants to arraign somebody and have them held indefinitely, and increase the charge of their conviction, the chance, of their conviction on, let's say, at best circumstantial evidence. The main resort of prosecutors now is not to anything that Attorney General Ashcroft has recently done. The main resort is to what's called the Effective Death Penalty and Anti-Terrorism Act, was passed by almost the whole Congress under the initiative of President Clinton a few years ago, which, as you may remember, also enormously increased the number of offences for which the death penalty could be applied and very greatly shortened the appeal process, if not abolished it in many cases. Nobody noticed that going by because it was considered to be a necessary law and order measure for the re-election of President Clinton to a second term. People who will give up their civil liberties for reasons like that, for reasons as short-term and opportunist and cheap as that one, are obviously going to be pretty easy to stampede when planes full of human beings have flown into buildings full of human beings. But let's not be in any doubt as to where this rot set in or for who is responsible for it.
Do you think we are becoming a society of sociopaths?
You know, I sometimes get asked, or I did until recently, because I'd written books against people like Clinton, Mother Teresa, Henry Kissinger, isn't there anyone you like? And now I can say, well, I've written this book about someone I think is rather good, George Orwell. So maybe I'm not as gloomy a person as you think, or as negative, but I must say all your questions are very depressing. Couldn't we have an upbeat question? No, we're not. We're not. But I think by no means is the United States becoming a society of sociopaths, or is in any danger of doing so. I'm afraid, though, that the traditions of generosity and tolerance and pluralism and non-judgmentalism, all of which are in their way as civilized accomplishments, are sometimes used to negate themselves. Are used to make people think, well, perhaps I'm not right in thinking that some people are bad and some people are good. Some people should be shot and some people should be spared. And who would I be to make that call? I wrote a piece in this weekend's Washington Post saying George Bush made a terrible mistake by saying that Saddam Hussein and Kim Jong-il were evil, because every educated, thoughtful, tender-minded liberal knows how to titter at such moral absolutism. We all know how to snigger. Evil, ha! He's painting it in black and white. We all know how to jeer at that. What he should have said is, attacking Saddam Hussein would be the lesser evil. Then every liberal would have been eating out of his hand. Lesser evilism we can do. We can name evil. We have the concept all right, but we only mention it in order to make accommodations with it. Now you're talking. Much better than cowboy rhetoric, isn't it? Or is it? How sure are you of that? Better be sure. The question is whether you have the fortitude, the self-confidence, and I would say the self-respect to say, your own culture is worth fighting for, and that that its enemies must be defeated. Some people really feel that they're being kind of judgmental if they say that.